why not hire a planner right now who can develop these things? I assume that's what planners do. That's been my experience with our previous planner, when we had one back in the 90s and early 2000s, that they're good not only at, they're good at both developing and then implementing what they developed, and it's also, there's more ownership in that. Now, so we're saying, why not just hire a planner and you save, you get someone full-time instead of just a consultant who comes in and does it on a part-time basis. And then you have to get a planner anyway in order to implement it. They don't even, HMS didn't talk about the long-term. They just talked about how difficult it is to maintain it once you get it. Mm-hmm. And we just think it's a working, breathing, and we just say, we don't want something that just sits on the shelf, as our previous strategic plan was back in 1998. Yeah. And so we're going to right. So we want a planner anyway. And if we're going to get a planner later on, why not have them come in and take ownership? Mm-hmm. So that's.
But you're probably going to need a mix of both.
We could fix it all, you know. You could concentrate on your management issues, and we could do the building for you.
All right.
That's why Steve's still around. Steve, don't be taking Steve's job.
Any other discussion of insurance, liability, staffing issues? Can we move on to question 4? Back step, yeah, we passed that over. So concern about expansion. I know we talked about this the last time we all got together, and you were reassuring us that expansion of the schedule is limited really to the staging setup.
Right.
And yet things continue to point to continued increase in boat runs in the schedule, scheduled and unscheduled runs.
So let me ask a question. Can you give this to the Boston Globe? Because they love to say that we canceled 549 trips. And
we don't replace any either.
Yeah,
so I think there needs to be a little context added to that.
To the adding of the unscheduled.
To that statement that, yes, we did add, there's unscheduled trips, but
right.
That's because of the cancellations.
And that's when a lot of those unscheduled trips come in.
Yes.
We just pack them in when we can.
We replaced the Martha's Vineyard with the Sankaty.
Right.
And we also probably, does that include the Sea Street?
It may, yes.
May include the Sea Street.
But also you add unscheduled trips when there's excess demand, correct?
Well,
because I think that says that on your printed schedule.
Yeah. My memory of that, and now that I'm not in the office on a daily basis, is that we usually schedule the freight boats. We can schedule on this route 7 round trips a day per boat, and it fits within the triple cruise schedule. But because we don't have that much demand, even during the summer on weekdays, particularly, we only put in the printed schedule 6 round trips. And it's because we'd like to not run trips if we don't have to. And so, particularly with Mark, when we put the 7 round trips in the printed schedule and online, and people made reservations for that last trip of the day, if they were one of a few cars or a few trucks.
It wasn't just cars or trucks, it was just because it was on the printed schedule.
It was on the printed schedule.
You had to run the trip.
We would have to operate it. And so
people would arrive and there'd be no boat.
Right. So we have, a few years ago, more than a few years ago now, we just put in the 6 round trip. And then if it turns out that we need the additional demand, the crew's already there, the boat's there, we operate that 7th round trip. Mm-hmm. And so that's a number of those unscheduled trips.
How do you fill them? Because you don't necessarily have same day standby, right?
Well, we actually have a pretty good reservation system that has a wait list capability. And so people will make reservations for that day or the next day, but if they can't get a reservation, they can go on the wait list. And so we look at the wait list, and at some point we say, there are a lot of people who haven't gotten their reservations, they're on the wait list for today. They have put in the wait list a time which would cover this. And so when we open up that boat for that one trip, the computer automatically gives them a reservation on that boat. And so we can fill it. And the customer has the ability to tell us how late they want us to process them. So do they get 24 hours notice, 48 hours notice? Do we stop processing their wait list request, how far in advance? And so that's it. What in turn happens often, there's nothing easy. When they get their wait list request and they go that night, which is when they wanted to go that day, they may not have had a reservation for a few days because that's the first one. That becomes open up, and then you get this domino effect that maybe people who couldn't get a reservation the following day now can take their reservation. So it's an interesting process, and that computer system has improved efficiencies a lot over the last 10 years. So that's one of the scheduling. The other unscheduled trips are that during the off-season, we may only have a boat scheduled for a double crew that works 12 hours or a single crew that works 8 hours. And if there is cold snap and all of a sudden we need more oil, heating oil or propane on the island, this is particularly true on the Nantucket route, but also here, I'm sure, we may bring in an extra crew to run the additional trips. Most of those are done for, I want to say, trucks, those types of traffics during the off-season. We also may do it during school vacation week. If we don't,
Just to accommodate people off the island, Sundays to get back on.
right. And so those are ones where we may not have a boat scheduled. We may increase the boat into the evening, or there are some times that we even bring it, if we have a spare boat available, we bring it up just to accommodate that additional stuff.
Does that happen a lot in the summer with big crowds? Or is it strictly school vacations or special holiday
It used to
events, or-
during the month of August,
Mhm.
because all of a sudden you have a lot of people coming off island during the month of August. You also have the agricultural fair that has to get off, and
They have like 3 things going at
they
the
have
same time.
and so,
Ag fair,
fair, I mean, the
the plus fireworks.
Yeah, the illumination.
Right.
and also
Every tag presents.
and so we, for the month of August, for several years, we would bring in a freight boat on the weekends. Now we have that freight boat, which is our only boat available, operating Mondays through Fridays in addition. So I don't know whether we did it last year.
So for instance, that freight boat it's capable of running 4 trips. We only schedule it to run 3, but there were occasions that we ended up running a 4th trip.
Right, right.
So did we run it on the weekends in August?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. I mean, in the past, we would run it on the weekends and not necessarily, well, on Mondays too, because that's after the agricultural fair ended, they would come off on a Monday. We also, around Thanksgiving, if we have a boat available, we would put it in an unscheduled trip, and that could be both this route and Nantucket route. We've started to schedule those, so I don't know whether those are now considered to be unscheduled trips. What we found out is that the sooner we schedule the trips and put them in the reservation system, we're rewarding the people who plan ahead. We think, all things being equal, are the ones who should be rewarded. So we try not to wait until it's late and then just put on an unscheduled trip. It's better for everyone if we can do it as far in advance as possible.
But for instance, within the last week or 2 here, when we had some cancellations because of weather, we did end up bringing one of the freight boats out from Fairhaven to run an extra trip.
Yeah.
Because at the time, we thought we would end up leaving people behind at the end of the day. As it turns out, it was really unnecessary, other than it did move people ahead. Because at the end of the day, we did have the space, but we did not know it at the time, and we felt it was important to be able to get particularly this time of year, to get the people back to their homes. So.
Yep.
Could I just say that this all revolves around volume going through Woods Hole? That's basically what we're talking about.
Right.
And in the
Cars and
past
trucks
couple of
coming and
years,
going.
in reading the Vineyard Gazette and the Times, and I'm seeing pushback there, and I think on Nantucket, that they don't want the volume that they're getting in seasonal summer traffic. That they're talking about putting a traffic light in at 5 Corners and Vineyard Haven, that there are traffic jams, and they're not necessarily happy with it. And I don't expect an answer to this, but somewhere along the line, from the time when the Enabling Act was written, and it said, you're going to provide adequate transportation and the necessaries of life to the islands. Now, the Steamship Authority, for the past 10 or 20 years, has been promoting the economies. It's in your literature that you are, you want to help grow the economies on the islands. And, that was great for a long time, but I think they're starting to push back, and I wonder if you should put it in your forward thinking.
Well, that's one of the ideas for a strategic plan and a planner,
Mhm.
in order to be able to think of those things. And I'm, preaching to the choir here. I think you've already learned it's a much more complicated issue than just what level of service we provide. It's complicated because you have, my understanding, I don't know whether you've looked at it, is that the number of cars registered on the islands have increased a lot over the years. And so you have people, even if we curtailed service, they've already had the additional cars, and that contributes a lot more to the traffic. And there's some people in our organization who think that's the main driver of the increased traffic on the islands. It's not us. I mean,
It's not tourism, it's,
but I'm not saying that.
Right,
I'm
right.
not saying that. I'm just saying you have to listen to everybody.
It's
and
certainly
try-
true.
And try to come up with that. A planner would be able to work with Martha's Vineyard Commission on that. It would be something where the island would speak.
Yeah.
They can get the island to speak in a cohesive way. I mean, we're there, if the island's saying adequate transportation is X or Y, I mean, that's,
No, there's
and
a
that's certainly
confluence of
the
causes.
case here, that
Yeah.
The
there's.
planner could really be so helpful interacting with them on those type of questions, like, will you be getting a trash compacting facility? Will you be creating a fuel storage depot so you're not so desperate every day running out of fuel?
so.
Will you promote sustainable energy sources more on the island, which would.
Would you support truck traffic from New Bedford the same way that you tax the summer people and to the benefit of the islanders? In other words, subsidize truck traffic from New Bedford.
You weren't at the last meeting, so.
I was.
But we talked about that at the last meeting. What we have, and I'll repeat it for the video audience out there, is that we have put forth, I mean, we've been asked if New Bedford service were to be provided, how would you recommend it be provided? And so back 2 years or almost 3 years ago now, we put out our operational model for how a New Bedford freight service would operate. We talked about, we think a private operator is the way to go, because we don't have the ability to expand our workforce in the summer and then contract it all the more in the winter if that's going to be the situation. It caused a lot of resentment in our rank and file employees when all of a sudden they thought they were going to be, a licensed tech officer in a few years, and then all of a sudden they find that it's going to be 5 or 6 years or 7 years before they get promoted. We also don't have the resources, human resources, to fill all those positions. We think it should start seasonally, because that's when most business is. We think that we have already said that we're willing to provide our ports, provided that they can be worked out with our own operating schedules. We're willing to give our reservation service to them, to allow them to use it, so that people think it's going to be better if a truck can know that if it can go one way between Martha's Vineyard and New Bedford, but the boat schedule, because it's a 22-mile ride or whatever, doesn't lend itself to the opposite, traveling conveniently in the opposite direction, that they can come through Woods Hole, that's going to increase the people going to or from New Bedford, if they have that option too. We initially had thought about possibly chartering the boat instead of using our employees, and it would be a wet charter, with the crew and everything, which is how we did it years ago with Seabulk. When we went to Craig Johnson, and he said he thought he could get private operators to do it with their own boats and crew under a license. We'd put in, I think 22 weeks was what we had envisioned, to have it operate 22 weeks. And we, at the Falmouth Selectmen, when we presented that a year or 2 years ago, The question was asked by Nat or by you or by everyone, you know, well, why 22 weeks? And we said, if a private operator were to come in and say they wanted to do it for, you know, 30 weeks, 40 weeks, if a private operator is going to do it, we're going to be,
You're okay?
we're okay with that because it's up to them. And they think it can be done at a profit. If you run it, they will come.
And you wouldn't be worried it would cut into your own margin enough during the winter especially to,
Our attitude is that if it makes for a more efficient transportation network, then everyone wins.
so how would you implement it? You put out requests for proposals for people with a license or,
We hadn't even, the problem, as many people know, is that there is no place to run from New Bedford.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Yeah.
so we're yeah, and so that's the thing. We could put out an RFP. That would be, there are good reasons to put out an RFP. It shows transparency, it shows lack of favoritism. It's what governments usually do to show that type of stuff. On the other hand, private businesses would not do that probably. They just go and negotiate privately with people. So I don't know. We could put out an RFP, but Craig Johnson thought that he could work with people and get someone to come in. I think the important part is if we were simply to negotiate with someone, and it wouldn't just be the steamship authority involved. It would be everyone.
so Fairhaven's not New Bedford, I understand people live all around in the small streets. Still, could you use the Fairhaven facility for any boarding of anything?
No, we aren't allowed under an enabling act. We can't run any service from Fairhaven. So.
Steve, speaking as someone who did submit my comments
Yes.
to your proposal, the huge disappointment for me is that the RFP never made an appearance, and I know there's not an obvious place in New Bedford, but that wasn't, I don't think the RFP needs to depend on that, and this would be a great step forward, signaling that to New Bedford, to whoever's going to be providing access along the New Bedford coastline, that you're ready to go.
I do disagree with that. I think an RFP needs to have a viable system where someone can say, yes, we will be able to operate next year, or a very clear time frame. Because otherwise, why would anyone spend their time responding to it if there's no real possibility at this point that they can see with any type of depth? If we're talking business people.
You have to draft a practice RFP.
Well,
In case anybody just wants
no, but we haven't.
Well, now the
That's right.
We have it. We have it in place. That's not the difficult thing.
yeah, just we could be here in 5 more years, and you could make the very same statement.
I think the focus has to be on getting a place to operate from in New Bedford, principally New Bedford, because I think you asked we did a study of ports around Commonwealth and Massachusetts, and we concluded that New Bedford was really the only viable choice.
Steve, you said something, you said that the Enabling Act would not allow you running from Fairhaven, I guess,
Right.
was that?
That's correct.
And I understand that. But the Enabling Act gets amended from time to time.
Yep.
How does it get amended? What is the process for amending the
It's the
Enabling?
legislature and then signed by the governor.
But you must make a request for it.
We have made a request. We generally,
It's bonding very often.
it's very bonding.
Yeah.
It's bonding. If we run into financial constraints that,
But does it have to be you? Does it have to be SSA?
I would think it'd be the Board of Governors. I mean, the Board of Governors is really the,
I mean, it couldn't come from a citizen group.
we have had some in the past where unions have made some requests, and for the most part.
For the Enabling Act?
Yeah,
Oh,
they wanted to have a binding arbitration for labor contracts, which in our view was not a wise move because arbitrators don't have any skin in the game.
mhm.
No one, the MBTA is binding arbitration. It's in a fiscal mess. What, $7 billion the last I heard, or $8 billion. That's only one small part of that, but of that one.